Welcome to Season 2 of Healing the Tigress, a podcast of conversations and stories on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. We are your hosts, Peggy, a perinatal mental health therapist,
and Jasmine, a clinical pharmacist who is perinatal mental health certified. As Taiwanese American mothers who lived through postpartum depression and anxiety, we felt like we didn't hear about other AAPI mothers struggling with their mental health in new motherhood. But we knew it couldn't just be us.
So we created this podcast because we hope that sharing these stories can start to break the stigma of mental health in our community and help heal the inner tigress in all AAPI parents.
Hi, everyone. We are really excited today for today's guest because we've basically grown up alongside her in our early 20s into motherhood. And she's pretty much celebrity status to us. So we might be fangirling a little bit over here. You may recognize her as one of the original content creators on YouTube, from also her starring in like Wong Fu production shorts to her beauty tutorials online. And you may also know her as FrmHeadtoToe.
Please help us welcome Jen Chae, a beauty and lifestyle content creator. Over the last 16 years, she has cultivated a following of over 2 million followers on her social platforms, sharing everything from makeup tutorials to candid conversations about relationships and motherhood. As one of the first artists to create monolid tutorials for YouTube, she continues to empower others to embrace their own definition of beauty, both inside and out. Jen, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed on Healing the Tigress. Can you please tell our listeners who may not know you as well a little bit about your cultural background and where you are in your motherhood journey right now?
Well, my name is Jen. I go by Jen Chae online. I am Korean American. So my parents immigrated and I was actually born in Kansas, where there was not a lot of diversity. So that's sort of my background. But of course, at home, we grew up very Korean as well. I am a mother of two. I have a daughter who is 8 years old and a son who's 6 years old. So I love them so much.
They are so cute. I love seeing them in your content too. We know also as a content creator that we get to see many of your life aspects online. And oftentimes, though, people don't really see some of the harder parts. And I think especially in motherhood, it can feel like there's a lot of pressure to seem like you're having a good time, you're, keeping up in the background. So what can you tell us about your postpartum journey when you first became a mom?
Well, I think that one of the hardest things for me at the time was sort of the pressure about always having to post at the same pace that I was posting at before I gave birth. And when you are, wearing a diaper and leaking out of your chest and, trying to just keep this newborn alive where they have to eat from you every 2 hours, it's extremely hard to also have a separate part of your mind be like, oh, but I need to record everything. I need to film everything. I need to create content out of everything. I think that was extremely hard for me because I actually had a very sort of traumatic labor delivery the first time. I had quite a lot of tearing and I actually had an infection. So I was just battling the physical healing from that with the pressure of like social media, if that makes sense. So I know a lot of moms nowadays, this is already, 8 years ago, a lot of moms now, they make such cute, relatable content about what it really is like in those first few days. But to be honest, I don't know if I could have at the time. It was really difficult for me, to be honest.
Yeah. And I also feel like obviously we have a podcast now on mental health for Asian American mothers. And I do think probably 8 years ago, that was a lot less common to even talk about the mental status or state or health of what you were going through as a new mom. And so that might have been also harder to come up with content if people weren't even really talking about that at that point.
Yeah, that's really true. They weren't doing it the same way that they're doing it now. I actually did try to take photos and, just capture a few sort of real moments, like what my body really did look like. But I guess in a way, I think that at the time, it was a lot more glamorized than it is now. I think that if I were to experience that now, I would have a really different mindset about it, not like put so much pressure on myself.
Can you share a little bit about that difficult recovery and how were you even able to share some of it without being able to share it in the way that you maybe would have now that a lot more people are open about?
So, if you look at my YouTube channel, I actually posted a video, I want to say maybe about 6 months after I gave birth. And it's basically just like, I was traumatized. My traumatized like labor and delivery story. Because for the first few months when your baby's born, it is such a beautiful thing. You get to share things about new motherhood and all the changes that happen. And it's this wonderful, positive thing. But I didn't feel like I really got to share how difficult it was. And then I got to a point where I was like, I can't put off talking about this indefinitely. And it's something that is such a big hurdle emotionally, mentally, physically, that I don't feel like I can really move on unless I vocalize what I went through. Like, I don't want to just pull the rug. I don't want to just cover everything up. I want to be really honest about what happened because surely there is somebody else who went through a similar experience to me. So basically, I sat down and I shared my whole story. And the crazy thing is that most people were very, very, very supportive. In fact, I think that there was so little dialogue about people talking about these kinds of real experiences that a lot of people just overwhelmingly also shared their traumatized stories.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was really empowering for people to hear my trauma, like I didn't have to live with that by myself. But there was also like a surprisingly large percentage of people who came out of the woodworks to say, women have been having babies for thousands of years. What makes you special? What makes you think that just because, you know, you were in a hospital with all of these nice medical things to help you, you get to complain? Other women were having babies out in fields and they're fine. And it was just like, all right. Like it was interesting to sort of hear both sides. And I don't fault anyone for that. Like everybody processes what they went through in really different ways. And I think some people feel very defensive when they have gone through motherhood and they see somebody else having a harder time. They don't want to give other people that voice, which was surprising to see it firsthand. But on the other hand, I feel like that whole process really helped me to learn and grow about other people and how we do deal with our traumas. So that's sort of, I guess, backstory. What really happened is I'm a very short person. I'm only 4'11", and my husband's like 6 feet tall. So if you can imagine, I pictured my babies being like tiny little like 6 pound things that would just, make their way out of my body into the world. Like I didn't know what would happen. And I would say that my kids are average sized for a normal height person, but coming out of a very small body. Like I am not just short, I'm also very narrow bodied, like I'm a small person. And so suffice it to say that by the time I gave birth, I looked like a walking watermelon. Like
Oh,
I just really was inhaling the front part of my body. So the doctor thought everything, they were doing the massages, they thought everything was going to happen fine. But I think at the last minute, I had a lot of tearing, both internally and externally. After I gave birth, I just remember the nurse was there stitching for like, it was probably like an hour. And
wow.
it's like, the thing that I'm still trying to sort of wrap around my head is they told me that it was a second degree tear, which means external and internal tearing. But the range of what that could mean is so extensive because by the time it's third degree tearing, you're already going all the way through to the back hole. Like there's, and so when you tell people like, oh, I had degree tearing, I don't think that people understand what that could be and how bad that could be. I had, yeah, a lot of stitches. It probably took a full month postpartum for me to be able to go to the bathroom on my own. Like every time I had to have somebody basically like help me walk to the bathroom. After I gave birth, I had zero ability to hold my urine or gauge any, like all the nerves were just destroyed kind of.
Yeah.
And so if I just stood up, if it had been a couple hours, I would just it was just like a faucet was just open. I had no sense of urinary continence or, like I couldn't hold anything. It probably was 2.5 months before I could sit without being in pain.
And I think that's like a real also experience that people are like, well, everyone goes through this. But just because people go through this kind of experience, and why can't we also be able to express that this is hard and that this is painful? And when you're saying this to me, I feel that. I'm like, like I feel for her. And because I went through it too, right? But the people that you're talking about who are like, well, women have been doing this for forever.
But not everybody experiences it. I mean, from having two children, I can very much say it was not the same. The second one was not traumatizing. It was still hard, but I wasn't traumatized from the second one. I think the first time, I guess I didn't quite mention this, but it's because I had an infection. There was an instance of like after, the first time you take the baby to the doctor, after you give birth, I think it's like 3 days, I couldn't really walk on my own. It was incredibly painful no matter how I took over-the-counter medicines. Like it just was unbearably painful. And I like to think I have a fairly high pain tolerance as well. So I took Arya to the pediatrician. Ben was like my husband was helping me walk in. And I think that she was doing pretty okay. She had lost a little bit too much weight. So they're like, you're going to have to bottle feed, which was stressful enough to kind of figure out. But then at the end of the appointment, I said to the pediatrician, I said, hey, I know I'm here for my daughter, but I really need to talk to somebody. I'm in extreme amounts of pain. And even though I've been staggering my ibuprofen and Tylenol like they said we could, just kind of like overlapping them so that I wasn't having a period where I wasn't covered with medicine, it's still unbearably painful. Can you help me? And then she basically said she actually took a pencil and she wrote on that paper that lays on the place where you can sit, and she wrote out a schedule of alternating ibuprofen and Tylenol, but there were 2 hour gaps in between where I wasn't covered by medicine. So it was less helpful than what I was already doing. And it felt a little bit like very condescending. Like, are you smart? Are you not smart enough to know how to stagger your medicine? And it's like, look, we had a printout of every single medicine I needed 24 hours throughout the day that we would like, I would wake up and like take these medicines. Like we were on top of it. And for her to speak to me like that when I was like just desperately crying for help because I was in so much pain, I felt I just didn't know what to do. And I was like, no, like we're taking everything like we should. I'm in a lot of pain and I don't know what to do. And she kind of like was frustrated at me and she was like, if it's bad enough, you should just go to urgent care. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then we left and I went to urgent care with my 3-day-old newborn, where there were like super sick people coughing around me, and we were like covering her in blankets, and I was like barely able to walk. I hobbled into urgent care. Thankfully, I got onto like, I was seen. They laid me on a bed. It was freezing cold. I laid back in that little thing so that the doctor who was available could see me. And, my legs are propped up. Like I just have like the curtain thing on. And she looks at my 3-day postpartum privates and she said, "Oh God." And it's like, I felt bad, but I wasn't looking at what was going on. And I don't know what it is. It's my first baby. I don't know what's normal. I don't know if the pain is normal and I'm just crazy, And I've already had one doctor kind of mentally dismiss me. And for her to look at my privates and say, "Oh God," was like, it's scary,
Yeah.
So basically, she told me, "I think you have an infection. I'm going to prescribe you some antibiotics." And then I was like, "Is that going to be okay with the baby?" And she's like, "I think you should take the antibiotics. You're going to heal better if you take it." It's like, because you hear about like, oh, if you take antibiotics, the baby could get thrush and like you're going to have like itchy nipples and, um, because I wanted to breastfeed as well. And my, all of that, all the things happening in those first few days.
That sounded hard.
Yeah.
Oh, no wonder why you were in so much pain. Like,
Yeah, I know.
It makes sense.
What breaks my heart about your story is like the first person you go to for help immediately dismisses you. And it's like, this woman just gave birth 3 days ago, right? Like, and this is such a common difficulty that so many moms have because I don't know when you saw your OB, but the first person most moms will see is the pediatrician. And you think about, and we've talked about this before in some other episodes, the number of appointments you had while pregnant leading up to the birth. Suddenly you're seeing your OB like practically every day. The moment you give birth, you don't see her for another 6 weeks. And sorry that I said her, it could be a male, but you don't see your OB for another 6 weeks. And so I've always wondered too, this is such a systemic issue with postpartum moms. They see the pediatrician way more times before you see the OB, that it's also just this like struggle of the pediatrician feeling like, not my problem, not my monkeys, not my circus. But then also the system isn't set up in a way where they have your OB see you right away. And next thing you know, you're in urgent care. When were you able to see your OB after this whole thing with the infection and everything? And what support were they able to offer you, if at all?
I saw them at 6 weeks. So I told them about what happened at 6 weeks. And their first reaction was, "Why didn't you call us?" And I was like, I didn't know I could. I didn't know I was supposed to. I didn't know. And then it's also like, it makes me feel like, oh shoot, like, why didn't I call them? Like it's my fault. But the system is just not set up to be like, hey, if something happens, if you feel like you have an infection, if you have fevers and chills, which I did, and I didn't know, I just thought I was recovering, I thought that was normal. If you have those signs, call your OB, call them directly, get in touch with them right away, because this is a time where you have like open wounds on your body. You can get an infection, and that could be extremely serious and scary. So, I mean, I know now, and hopefully people listening will know, but I didn't know.
This makes me think of the podcast Jasmine has been on before, No One Told Us. And it's like, no one told Jen that one, your little 4'11" body is going to birth not adult size baby. Oh my gosh, what am I trying to say? Like, an average size baby, not like a petite baby, and what that would entail. Like, there's so much going into motherhood that is just not talked about. There's no expectations. And all of these are outside of your expectations. And again, it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. It was, again, the system in place that isn't really necessarily set up for moms, or just a lack of this care, this covering, this care between like, where are you supposed to go? I know for my birth, right after, my OB actually did come see me in the hospital after I gave birth, but it's also because that's the hospital she delivers in. She just happened to be on shift the next day and just popped in and said hi. She didn't like check on anything. It was just like, hey. I was like, cool, hey, But these aren't necessarily the things that happen for everyone. And there isn't a lot of information about what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to call, where you're supposed to go. And so when you're faced with the one medical provider that you know you're going to see, of course you're going to ask, what do I do? I'm in pain, right?
Well, and I think the other thing is that some people don't even ask. So, like you said, Peggy, Jen even had the courage to ask, because I feel like a lot of times, and I don't know if this is being Asian American, but we minimize things a lot too. So the fact that you are crying out for help and asking for help, that's already a big step. And then to be dismissed is just totally sucks, I think, this is, for lack of a better way of saying it. Like, that's, to me, as a person that works in the medical field too, like that's horrifying to me. That's the kind of bedside manner that there was. And I imagine with all the difficulties with physical recovery, the tearing, the infections, the urinary incontinence, right, for like a month or two, how did that impact your mental health during this postpartum recovery time?
That was really tough because I realized as soon as you give birth, if you're on social media, then everybody feels like they have the right to tell you what you're doing right and wrong, whether you really talk about it or not. It's really, really astonishing. I'm kind of so thankful that the main focus of my content as a whole was never just like motherhood. Like, I don't consider myself to be a mommy blogger. Even when I was going through those things, like that was the only thing on my mind is motherhood and taking care of my babies, and that's all I wanted to do. But I'm very thankful that I sort of held on to that identity outside of all of that, because that is such a tornado that if you are lost into the tornado of always being criticized about how you're mothering and what you're doing right and wrong in that very vulnerable stage, you can completely lose your identity to the crushing weight of failure. I don't think any of us are actually failing. I think it's just really, really hard. No matter, you could have the easiest baby and delivery, and it's still going to be one of the hardest things you ever go through. And I just think that I wish from like a mental health standpoint that everyone was so much more supportive and mentally available to each other, and especially to new moms. But the reality is it's not like that. I really, really, really struggled, like I said, for a good 6 months. And until I actually posted my video and got so much more feedback from extremely supportive people in the community who had gone through very similar stories, that was really helpful. But if I'm going to be completely honest, I didn't really heal from all of that trauma until I gave birth the second time, and it was a better experience because I was terrified. I was terrified I would go through that again. And I wouldn't even consider, honestly, I wouldn't consider myself to be in the like PPD category. It's just that like my actual physical recovery was so traumatizing for me that it was just hard to physically like hold my baby, to go to the bathroom, to like do all of those things. I feel like I wasn't even, I don't know if I had, I just really wanted to take care of my child. So I guess I didn't personally struggle with like the like being bitter, about motherhood itself. Like I wanted so badly to mother all the time, but I think I felt really scared of my body. I felt really scared of like just the pain. The physical pain was so hard. And then I also had kind of a very weird mentally wrapping my head around the physical changes postpartum. My body kind of got back to being the previous, at least like a semblance of like a normal shaped body pretty quickly. And I felt actually very uncomfortable about it because I would get all of these questions from people being like, "Oh, you snapped back. What did you do?" And to be honest, I was in sweats every day, leaking out of both boobies on my chest, feeding my kids, like dropping the ball with work all the time, missing deadlines. Like I have like no memories. I was running on two brain cells. My skin I felt like I was the crypt keeper. I had no moisture in my skin. I got like, it was just, I was very sleep deprived and sad and drained, and people are talking about my body, and I'm like, I'm not exercising. That was not at all where my head was about like trying to snap back. Like honestly, it felt very weird trying to like put on makeup and like be a beauty influencer with a cute baby and being like nothing ever happened, because it's like that is the opposite of how I felt on the inside. I think I went through kind of like a body dysmorphia period where it's not that I looked at myself and thought I looked worse than I was. It's that there was just such a disconnect between like what I was seeing and what I was experiencing, you know? I didn't want like the world's expectations and all of that pressure of like you have to be a
Mhm.
certain way, and how can I be that way? And then people will get angry that you're that way, and it's weird. It's
Mhm.
very strange. I don't know if that made sense at all, but
Yeah. Well, it makes me think the moment you decided to come out with your story, like 6 months later, where it was like,
Mhm.
okay, let's take off the glamour and let's just be real, that it was probably really therapeutic in some sense because you're like, this is what's been going on. This is what I went through. And, Jasmine had kind of mentioned before that there was a lot of power in your ability to advocate for yourself when you asked for help. That, like, even coming and sharing your story 6 months later on YouTube, you were also essentially advocating for other people who have gone through something similar and lending them a voice. Because then when the community responded and was like, oh my goodness, yes, me too, I've been through that. And of course, there's the naysayers who have their own issues and problems for whatever reason they want to come and challenge you. But you lended a voice to people who don't have a platform to say, I had a really traumatic recovery too. And so it makes me think of, like, had you not gone through that, what it would have looked like to be a voice for people. And not that you have to go through something traumatic to be a voice for people, but how do you think you've changed over the years since then of going through that, being this voice in terms of advocating for yourself or for your children?
I always think it's really important to say the hard thing. I'm the kind of person where I would rather do the hard thing once than the easy thing 5 times, or like the easy, but it's harder and longer in the long run. When I did that video, I didn't make it at 6 months because that's when I was healed enough to do it. It's that I literally could not wrap my brain around even talking about it, even to myself, without completely breaking down before that point. I just can't, I couldn't even, there was too much at stake in front of me that I couldn't even think about what I experienced. It was just like exceedingly traumatic for me. So I don't think I started healing until after that point. And
Wow.
and as much as I want to like say it's because I was doing it for other people, which I was, but I was really doing that for myself because I couldn't start to heal until I talked about it. And I think it's also, if people don't want to hear about it, they could just not watch the video. But I think people also deserve to know some people's reality, you know? Like people deserve to know a lot of different experiences about what labor and delivery can be like. Because it's not perfectly easy for everyone. And in the end, like I still very much believe it's very worth it. Like, obviously, I did it again.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't think that anybody has to share anything. I think that you can go through and walk through your experiences however you like. And we all have the right to disclose or not disclose whatever we feel comfortable with. And that is also a right answer, to
Mm-hmm.
not share that. I just feel so very thankful that when I did, it helped me not to feel so much alone. And if it does help other people in the process, then I think that is absolutely incredible. But selfishly, I'll say that when I did that, it was because I needed it. And that's okay too. That's an okay answer too.
I
Yeah.
kind of love that you're creating this space and permission for people to do what's best for them And I thank you for your honesty in just saying that, like, in selfishly in that moment, it was therapeutic for you, and that's okay. And that's how we start healing, but we heal together too, right? Because in you sharing that, you probably helped heal other people too without even realizing that. And that's the power of sharing stories, which is why we do that here. And I think that another story that you had opened up in the past few years and started sharing about was actually more about mental health. And I remember watching one of your videos, I think you did it with Ben actually, where you were talking about your history with panic attacks in the past and your anxiety and how you didn't even know what that feeling was, or that there was a name for that, or that you could even get help for that. So I'd like to maybe shift gears and talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure there's people out there too who are trying to put names to things that they didn't know that they could seek help for this or get help, or even just hearing about someone going through it and what they did might give them permission or just the drive to take that next step to get help. And so how did you eventually seek help for these panic attacks or anxiety attacks? And then what's been helpful for it?
Well, I think the first time I ever had a panic attack was probably like high school, but like you said, I didn't know what was happening. I was hyperventilating and I couldn't breathe. And that happened very extremely sporadically, like not a whole lot until maybe after college. So like young adulthood, being in my 20s, I think was probably when it was at its worst, actually, before I even had kids. And the crazy thing is, I worried a lot if it would ramp up during pregnancy because, you have so many hormonal shifts. But the craziest thing for me is, I mean, I am not in any way, I don't have any medical knowledge or why, but I think I barely had any my entire pregnancy. And then after I gave birth, it was also I barely had them. So I think for me, there was an aspect of like probably like hormonal balances that were things weren't firing totally properly. I think that naturally I have like a very strong fight or flight. Like if I'm at the movie theater and there's like something that jumps out, I will like toss my popcorn and like feel like somebody's gonna attack me. Like it's really I have quite a strong imagination, a strong bodily reaction, and I just think there are times where my body overreacts. But for extremely many years, I just didn't know what that was. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know what to call it. I just always felt like I was too much, too
Mm.
emotional, too all over the place. And, growing up raised by my Korean parents, something my my dad would say is like he has a very stable kind of personality, and he was also raised in a world where like it's weakness to show a lot of emotion. And so he would say, your sister is really strong, but you're really weak. You need to be stronger, and he meant like I want you to mature in your emotional regulation, I think.
Didn't have the words for that, but that's what he meant.
Adult words that we use as parents, right? Um, but it made it so that I didn't learn how to do that until my adulthood. And when I couldn't keep all of the when I would cry, when you get that lump in your throat and it's gonna come out and you can't help it, especially if you're like working in an office. I don't know, that is like one of the hardest pressures I think that I experienced before I did this. I worked in an office, and if you are in a situation where you need to be professional, you need to be like solid, and you're not, like I think that there is that Asian sense and pressure of being like, what do we do? Like, this is not okay. This is not okay to act like that. And I think that those two halves of me, like, it met a point, many points, right? Like every time I would have an anxiety attack or panic attack, and usually it wasn't during the event that was stressful. It would be like a day or two later, out of nowhere. my body would just physically break down because it didn't process all of the stress. I didn't know how to. If I'm going to be completely honest, I still have panic attacks once in a while. I wonder if it's just something that is never going to be completely something I don't struggle with once in a while. But I would say it's a lot more manageable now after I've gone through having therapy, after I've gone through a lot of having more tools for my own emotional regulation, things that I can do to ground myself. But it's definitely not something that I learned in my household growing up. But it is because of what I've experienced. It's definitely something that I try to teach my kids, even from a young age, of like putting your feelings into words, vocalize how you're feeling. Like, we can walk through it together. You're not alone.
I like that you normalize that you can still get panic attacks. It's not like a blink of an eye, you can fix it. And I also think that there is a propensity for certain people, for whatever reason, to be more sensitive to anxiety, right? If you think about hunter-gatherer days, the anxious ones are the ones that are probably like the saber-toothed tiger's coming, we better run, right? Like
They
versus
lived.
they survived and those genes got passed down and we're here today. And now instead of a saber-toothed tiger, it's a deadline that's due by end of day. And you're like, I can't make that deadline by end of day. But I also love that you're modeling this for your children. And even when you pointed out how your dad said it and you're like, well, let me reframe that. He really just wants me to have good emotional regulation. What are some other ways that you've been really modeling that for your kids?
You know, I feel like there are a lot of things about our personalities that naturally are passed on to our children. Like a lot of personality things are genetic, right? But it's also like the way that you raise them that passes down to them. So I know I'm a more feeling sensitive kind of person. And so when they have their big feelings, I think one of the things I try to do is really try to teach them, like, look, Mama and Daddy are not perfect. You know, nobody's perfect. You're not a bad person. People are just people, and we have good things that happen, and we have bad things that happen. Just when bad things happen, it doesn't mean your whole day is a bad day. It just means it was a day and a bad thing happened. I think that if we reframe how we use our words to describe events or a day or yourself, I think that's a big thing. It's just like, be kind to yourself. I say that probably at least 5 times a day, is just telling everybody, be kind, be kind. I say to Ben, don't troll Oreo. Be kind to him because it's going to bite you in the butt. You wonder why Oreo always runs to me first. It's because you're always like, but with the kids, I think that that is the greatest struggle, even at very young ages, even at like 8 years old. Like, I think that even young kids really struggle with identifying themselves as bad instead of accidentally making a mistake. Oops, I did that, but it's fine. I'll figure it out next time, and this is going to make me stronger. So I really try to have a lot of talks about how it's better to be brave than perfect, and how it is really important to be kind to yourself. Like, that is like the most important thing you can do for yourself, is to be kind to yourself and give grace to yourself. But then I also try to share with them more instances of when I struggle with something similar to what they're struggling with, and say, like, look, even at 40, I have still had things where I was embarrassed in front of my friends and I didn't know what to do. So if you have a time where you're with your friends and you didn't know what to do and you were embarrassed and you were crying and you were really upset at school, like, it's okay. You're 8, almost 40, and I still have that. And so I think that helps them to recognize, oh, that doesn't make me a bad person. It just makes me a person. Not trying to be perfect to them all the time, I think is really important. You know, having that empathy, not because I want them to see me as like a failure, but really because I want them to have a more positive perception of themselves where they can more easily forgive themselves.
Yeah.
Because if I can do it, they can too,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
I love your passing down these lessons that you've learned the hard way to them at such an early age, because it's almost like I feel like you are allowing these emotions that maybe you were never allowed, or more just like you were told to just toughen up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think nowadays we are finding value in the range of emotions and being able to express and process them, which it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like your kids are learning this ability at a young age. I have hope for our generation of kids, like our kids growing up, because we're giving them these tools and the permission and validating them. And maybe some people call this gentle parenting. I don't think there's anything to me though like gentle about it, because I think we're just equipping them with the tools to make them stronger as they grow up, right? I think we have to, feel to heal, right? So feelings are not bad.
I can
And,
hear the childhood trauma pressing on your chest when your feelings are not bad.
I'm trying to believe that as I say that, right? The reason I finally reached out to you to speak on this podcast, I'm going to actually share about what kind of inspired me. I actually saw you post a clip about speaking on a panel, I think about API beauty. And you said that, you forged your own path basically and created your own techniques of makeup because you were told that monolids were not beautiful actually by our own Asian community.
Mm-hmm.
But you wanted to make your own standard of beauty. And I feel like so much of Asian beauty standards can be based on chasing these ideals that we might not have been born with, right? And when I heard you say this, it kind of made me think about how moms are also given this sort of impossible standard and ideals to chase, that we have to fulfill this perfect mother image, this strong mother image, this I can do it all, that self-martyring kind of image. Well, how do you think your journey in your field has shaped the Asian American mother that you have become today?
I question myself about this a lot because, like I said, even when I was having my first baby and the whole snapping back thing, I think I had this deep fear that I was part of the problem that would cause other people to feel bad about themselves. And I hate the idea of that. I also can't help my own body process and what happened. I wasn't trying to be any certain way, but I just didn't want to be part of the problem. But it's also like the only thing I can really do to not be part of the problem is to put more positivity in the world, to give a better perspective to the world. People are going to always judge appearances no matter what. If you're in your pajama pants with a dirty bun, somebody's going to judge you. If you're in high heels 6 months postpartum looking snatched, somebody's going to judge you. So I think that the only way out is to stop caring about the people who are judging you and start caring about what you care about and just put the headphones on, just I think that that's one of the greatest lessons that we learn as mothers, because when you're younger than that, you just think that the world sends you messages and you just receive it, and that's it. But I think after motherhood, I changed my perspective to I choose what I let in. I don't have to live by and express myself in a way that's accommodating to others because it makes them feel more or less comfortable. Like, it literally does not matter what other people think. And that's why I kind of even said about my postpartum story, at the end of the day, I didn't want to post that for other people because I don't want any of what other people say and all of that noise to affect my own healing journey. I had to do it for me. And I think anybody who talks about their postpartum journey, first and foremost, needs to do it for themselves because you're the one who lives with you day in and day out. Nobody else gets access. And we have to love ourselves. We have to be our dearest friend. We have to be our greatest advocate. I could say it's selfish, but truly, I think even the way we navigate our trauma It's self-love. It's listening to ourselves in the face of nobody else listening to us, but mostly not needing anybody else to listen. I could have posted that and had nobody watch it, and that would have been fine with me because I needed to get it out. You know, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that people do listen to the words that I say, and I find it such an insane privilege and such an insane privilege to be speaking with you about it. And this, to me, is a conversation between us. Whoever listens, I'm honored, but this is for us. And I think that if we talk about it from that point of view, that's when it does reach people, because that's when you're being honest, and that's when you're being personal. And that's, I think, ultimately the right reasons. Is like, you're not a better mom if you always forsake yourself. You're a better mom if you advocate for yourself and then teach your children to advocate for themselves. If you listen to your own feelings and listen to your own emotions, and then teach your kids to listen to their own feelings and listen to their own emotions, to become more mature and to be able to navigate trauma, and yet at the end, really be their own biggest cheerleader. We don't need everybody else's validation if you can validate yourself. It's nice, but not necessary.
I love your reframe of replacing selfish with self-love, because I think that growing up, we were told anytime you weren't thinking about other people and putting other people first, or worrying about what that auntie is going to think of you or this person's going to think of you. And so it's flipping that script and saying, no, it's not being selfish. It's loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves. We were never really given the space to do that. And when we did, it was labeled selfish. And so I love this message. I love that it's about, you did that for you because you needed it. You needed it for yourself. And of course we want to see our children love themselves. And how will they learn that if we don't do that for ourselves first?
Yeah. I'm nodding my head so hard to like everything Jen was saying. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. And, you know, I feel like your answer honestly just shows that like it really mirrors your path into what you do today too, and just what you had created with your monolid tutorials, that people are going to tell you that I think this is what's beautiful and you need to follow that. But no, you were like, I think there's another way around this, and I love myself for who I am, and I can show up and be beautiful without your standards. That's what I love about this. And also what you just said about motherhood. Like, I feel like there's such a perfect like mirroring here of all of that.
I mean, I learned how to do my makeup in the early 2000s because of you. And I was like, I've got these eyes. There's not a lot of, you get those makeup palettes from like Sephora that are made for white eyes, right? They're like, put this in your crease. Put what crease? And next thing you know, I'm going like this with my brush, and like, that's not working with my face. And so I remember finding you and feeling like, I can be beautiful with what I have, with the eye shape that I have. And that was really, really validating, healing for me as someone who actually grew up in so not from Kansas, but I grew up in a more predominantly white area too. And I was always like, I just need to be green-eyed, red-haired girl, because I had no, right? Like, I don't know, that was always my go-to, but like I had no example of like, what does beauty look like with the eyes that I have? And even though you may have been doing that again for yourself or for learning your own beauty as a Korean American, how that again is like teaching self-love to others.
I'm so touched to hear it from that kind of perspective. I feel like even with me starting the beauty things on my channel, it really felt like it was out of necessity. It was because I was raised in an environment where there was no sister to guide me. There was no, my mom, she was really big into skincare, not a lot of like color makeup kind of person. My sister, not particularly, you know, makeup-y type of person either. And I just really wished I had someone to go to for that kind of advice. So that's why I started. I feel like if I had grown up in LA surrounded by a strong Asian community, I would have just done my makeup like the other girls did their makeup. It would have just been hive mind, and that would have been fine. But I think that because I didn't have that, and also I felt like a little bit of a disconnect when I would see the like ABGs online and their like LA makeup, skin, the blonde streaks that were really popular at the time. And like, I was like, I don't I don't know how to like relate to that at all. And they would do the really, if you were monolided at the time, I don't know if you remember the really thick eyeliner, because they'd be
Yes.
like, if I open my eyes, you can't see it. And
Yeah.
it's like me by myself in Kansas. I was like, but I don't like how it looks. I don't want, like, every time you blink, it's like a black hole in your eyes. Like, I was like, I just don't think there's the only options are going to a Mac counter and having them put on like excessive makeup on your face where it looks like you got punched in the eyes, and like, hot pink on the cheeks. And they're like, oh, you have so much lid space. Let's just go ham. And so I was like, there has to be something else. There has to be something where you're not trying to adapt monolid or like small creased eyes to be like white people's eyes. There has to be a way to just make it look nice for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied art. I really love to paint and I love fine art. My degree is in design. So just based on like light and shadow and knowing how the sun naturally hits your face and enhancing that, that's where I started from. And I feel like whether people know it now or not, I feel like even if I see that coming across, like, I'm still proud of that, even if they don't know it's me, because other people are very much more famous and popular than I am. I just feel like I just tried to do that for my niche audience, and if people run with it, that's fine. But that's where I started from. The world is really good at making things beautiful, the way the light hits the world, and we can do that for our faces too. I still kind of have that mindset. I think a more natural face is still the most flattering. Something that enhances what you already have instead of just trying to teach from a perspective of like, how do you get it to look like one ideal picture? Because that's not realistic. We don't all look the same. We don't all have the same experience. I guess I think about that way a lot of ways.
I feel like you're ahead of your game because you were doing the clean girl aesthetic for Asian girls, like way before that was like a thing. Because now I think about it, I was like, oh wait, that's right. Like you were just
You
doing
give me
like
too much credit because when I
yeah.
look back, I'm like, why were my lashes so long? The fake lashes here.
I also love that, we talk a lot with our authors that come onto this podcast about how like, I was really searching for someone's experience and I wanted to read about someone that went through something that I did and I couldn't find it. So I made it. And I think that's the kind of same thing that you did, that like you were searching for something that you couldn't find and you wanted to be the person on the receiving end that you couldn't get it. So you made it, you delivered it. And I love that. That's very empowering. So thank you for sharing a lot of that journey with us. Like I said, we basically kind of grew up alongside you with the advent of YouTube and everything, and huge fans. So yeah.
You guys are doing that too with your podcast,
Oh, we're babies. Like, I don't know who we are, but
Jen, we're in our big lash stage, okay?
But I like that your core purpose is it's beyond just you. It's you wanting to have other people have resources for a pain you felt like you struggled with, and sort of the loneliness that goes with that. The loneliness of feeling like, oh, I'm not allowed to share this story. I just really appreciate that from like a human level.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm going to cry again.
I know. I've been like teary so much near the end of this episode.
I have cried so many times during this episode.
On that note, one thing that we love to ask our guests as we wrap up is, because this is about healing the tigress and about that inner healing, if there was something you could say to Jen back in the thick of it, maybe even that day that you're in that pediatrician's office and being shuttled off to urgent care with your newborn baby, what would you tell her?
Oh man. I wish this were easier to answer. I would say, if you feel like it's a problem, it's a problem. Don't downplay yourself. even if it might be something within normal motherhood, there is nothing wrong in asking for help because you're in the stage where you're allowed to. You're allowed to call every doctor. You're allowed to ask every question. You're allowed to know nothing because you're going through it for the first time. And I just don't, when my friends are having their first baby for the first time, I think one of this sounds so simple and it's almost like sometimes I feel like, why did I not know this? If you have a fever, if you feel chills, go to the doctor or at least call the doctor because I feel like my mom always told me that, after you have baby, somebody walks next to you, you feel the cold breeze in your body. And there's all those Asian traditions about covering up your body and staying warm. And there's a part of me that's like, did they all have fevers? You know, I think I'm not saying everybody's going to have a fever, but I guess what I'm saying is don't try to suck it up. Listen to your body. If your body is struggling, talk to a medical professional because there's nothing to lose, only you. And don't lose yourself in the process because it is not all 100,000% only about your baby. Like you literally had your placenta ripped out, you had the baby come out, you are a gaping wound. And then also on the emotional side, like don't discount your struggles. Like vocalize it, talk about it, complain about it, cry about it. Like that's all part of the healing process. And if I had known that before, I feel like I wouldn't have put so much pressure on myself to be strong because I think you don't have to be strong. You just had a baby. Like this is the time where everybody should just be like, they get a pass go ticket here. Like you get a free pass if you just had a baby. You can complain to everyone, you can cry if you want to. Like if you just let it all out and you communicate with everyone around, they can help you. Accept the help or advocate for the help, like go out of your way to try to get help. Because the more you get help, the more you can help raise your baby. So if you want that in the end, you have to take care of yourself. And that is so hard to do when you get no sleep and you're healing from a lot of mental and physical wounds.
Such great messages. All of that.
You're gonna make me cry.
Oh, Jen, thank you. Thank you so much for this honor today. We absolutely love talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people find more about you, Jen?
So I go by From Head to Toe on almost every platform. There's no O in from because back in the early internets, From Head to Toe is taken. So if you look up FrmHeadtoToe, that's the honest truth. I've been online for a long time now. If you just search From Head to Toe, though, on any platform, I should pop up. You can find me on YouTube. That's youtube.com/FrmHeadtoToe. I'm also on Instagram. Instagram is at FrmHeadtoToe. Facebook, if you look up From Head to Toe, I'm on there. Let's see, TikTok. I'm at jen.chae. It's a little different.
Okay. That is a different one.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining about that. I was kind of wondering where the O went.
I thought you were doing a Tumblr thing where you just like leave out vowels to be cool.
Tumblr.
I think that, it was a way for people to still be able to read it and know what it meant.
I mean, I always knew it was From Head to Toe, but I didn't know that it was because it was already taken. I love that little tidbit.
I learned something.
Basically, on every single platform, if you just look up From Head to Toe, even if it's spelled with an O,
You'll find
I
it.
should pop up. Yeah.
I bet the original person was like, dang it, no one can find me now.
It's yours now.
I fully take ownership of From Head to Toe. Mainly because I didn't want it to just be exclusive to beauty. I want to be able to talk
Mm,
about motherhood. I
Yeah.
want to be able to talk about fashion and skincare and like all the things. I think that we're all really complex people, and I want my content to be able to grow with my life and the things that I care about. So hopefully that is what happened.
yeah. And it brought
I
you
think
here today, so it's
Brought
working.
me here today.
Thank you again, Jen. We've really enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Healing the Tigress. The more we share these stories, the more we can help other AAPI mothers and partners. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to keep supporting this mission, please hit the subscribe button to the show and take a few seconds to leave a rating. An extra big thanks if you would also leave a review to boost our show visibility and help other AAPI folks find us.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Healing the Tigress, or even better, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Healing the Tigress podcast to support us more. Inside the Patreon, we will be offering more bonus episodes, sneak peeks, and a community for you to help shape our podcast too. Thanks for being here.
Healing the Tigress is produced and edited by Peggy and Jasmine.
Music for this show is remixed by Dr. Tony Huynh of Tony Mixes.
Our intro music is a cover of You and Me by Z Avi, played by our co-host Peggy.
Our outro music is a cover of Green Island Serenade, played by Jasmine's sister.
Cover art design is by Dr. Angela Chung.